Are all these binding vows going to catch up with Sukuna? Let's talk about that and a bunch of other questions from you guys, but manga spoilers beware. All right, first up, we got this question from Jude on will binding vows catch up to Sukuna? And I think yes and no, depending on exactly what you mean by that. Because yes, Sukuna has been doing binding vows left, right, and center during this fight to keep things rolling. But those have been personal binding vows. And for the most part, personal binding vows aren't the ones you have to be weary of if you break them. It's really a binding vow you make with someone else that has the horrific, ominous punishment that Gege has kind of teased for the entire series, with both Kenjaku and Sukuna being weary of them, right? So these binding vows he's doing right now, I don't think if he broke it, he would be punished by the universe. I think he would just lose whatever benefit he had gained from that binding vow. Now, I do think it's possible to construct a binding vow in a certain way that would punish you for breaking it, but from what we've seen for him, for the most part, I don't think the vows he's been doing have been that type. This is getting wordy. So do I think they'll catch up with him? I think yes, insofar as he is like putting certain conditions on himself that are ultimately going to add up to a lot, right? For example, in order to cast the world-cutting slash that caught Gojo off guard, he had to trade all of these other requirements for it in the future. So, he has to do the extra chance, the extra hand sign, and now that makes him effectively weaker in the present timeline. So if these other binding vows he's been doing will subsequently make him weaker and weaker as he goes on because he's just trying to make it through this fight, then yeah, those will add up and they are adding up. But again, if you meant will they add up in the sense that he's going to get this horrific punishment that's been teased, I don't know. But I do hope we see that horrific punishment because it's been teased and I want to know what happens. But I do think that would have to be more likely in a binding vow with somebody else. So like whatever his binding vow was with Kenjaku, or, if another binding vow is made with Yuji or Megami or whoever, then I think something like that would need to be broken for things to really hit the fan. Next up, I got this question from Michael on what possible paths were unlocked from Yuji's 8 black flashes. And I believe this is in reference to how we've been speaking about how Gojo got his RCT pathway through Black Flash, Sukuna got a new domain pathway through Black Flash, so what might Yuji have gotten? And I think the main thing he got was just unlocking Shrine in general, awakening Sukuna's curse technique. I don't think he carved any new pathways to RCT or domain just because he wouldn't need to, his brain is healthy enough to where those normal pathways would exist, if that makes sense. Now, does Yuji even have a domain? Not to our knowledge yet, but I don't think Black Flash would have unlocked a path to that, but it perhaps would have just unlocked it in general. And I know that seems like I'm saying the same thing, but just the distinction is Sukuna needed to find a new way to that in his brain, and Black Flash unlocked this. This would be more akin to after Mahito hit Black Flash, he realized how to do the 0.2 second domain after seeing Gojo do it. So this could be Yuji learning how to do domain for the first time. But yeah, in general, I think it was basically the awakening of the shrine. Next up, we got this question from Music on was Maki justified in wiping out her entire clan, and do I think Gojo would approve? This is tough because justified, probably not. That's not to say I don't understand, but I don't think it was justified just because she wiped everybody out. And not everybody was culpable in the crimes of the Zenen clan, There were women and children as well. So, no, I don't think it was justified, but again, I can understand why she did it, and I think Gojo would feel similarly. We know that Gojo could have wiped out anybody at any time, so I don't think he would approve either insofar as that it wasn't justified and there were innocent people, but I do think he would understand. Speaking of the clans, next up we got this question from No Name who wants to know if Sukuna was aware of the Zenen and Gojo clans back in the Heian era, or did they not yet exist? And when he saw Megami for the first time and noticed he could be useful, did he recognize the Ten Shadows? So I think the Gojo and Zenen clans, or at least their proto-clans, if you will, would have existed. So Sukuna could have been familiar with them, but I just don't think he probably had that many run-ins with them. And this is mainly because of how he reacts to Megami and the Ten Shadows. I don't think he knows what it is. Because, again, if you'll remember during his fight in Shibuya, he is testing Mahoraga, trying to figure out what Mahoraga can do. And he slowly pieces it together, that his ability is adaptation and, yada, yada, yada. So if Sukuna had any awareness of the Ten Shadows or the Zenen clan back in the Heian era, he wouldn't have needed to do that experimenting, if you will. So I do think they existed, but Sukuna probably just didn't interact with them that much. Next up, we got this question from Zach on the ideological battle between Gojo and Sukuna. And y'all pause to read the whole thing if you'd like, but I think Sukuna won that ideological battle against Gojo because he won the fight. And I think that was kind of the larger point Gege was trying to tell in that moment, that Sukuna, who cast away everything, was able to reach the greatest heights of Jujutsu, even defeating Gojo. Gojo, who has been struggling with that his entire life, right? Gojo's identity crisis is the crux of his narrative arc. He wasn't able to determine if he was who he was because he's him or because of his strength. And so I think that confliction in Gojo is why he lost to Sukuna. So I think this is like the large philosophical story kind of Gege has been telling. And my estimation is that Sukuna's ideology will be ultimately defeated by Yuji. The Yuji will be the one to show him what the true meaning of love is. I've talked about this in a video, so if you want to hear me wax poetic about it, check that out. I'll try to remember to link it down below. But yes, I think Sukuna won that ideological battle against Gojo, and I think he's won it in his entire life against everyone he's fought. But I do think he will ultimately lose to Yuji. Next up, we got this what if from John on would an Uzumaki powered by Rika, all 4 disaster curses, and cursed Naoya be able to defeat Sukuna? So here's what I'll say. Like, conceptually, yes. Like, I think that would be powerful enough. It would have enough juice to theoretically take him out. But in practice, in reality, I don't think it would. I think he would either find a way to defend against it, the same way he did against 200% Hollow Purple, or he would be able to dodge it or something like that. So I don't think this would work in the story, but it should technically have enough power to, if that makes sense. All right, next up, we got 5 questions here from JoJo, so let's run through these. And the first one is Uraume versus Yorozu. And I gotta go with the chef Uraume. Both of them are formidable, but the fact that Uraume is Sukuna's right hand, I think, says a lot. And just the feats we've seen from Uraume thus far in the manga are very impressive. Like, the power that technique seems to have is crazy. And again, just the fact that Sukuna, chose Uraume, I think speaks volumes. So I gotta go with the chef. Next, the best fight of the Culling games, and JoJo, I already know I agree with you here. Yes, it is Hikari versus Kashimo, for sure. Third, what curse technique for Toji? This is hard, because, like, his entire character is the Heavenly Restriction, but if I had to give him one, maybe, like, the opposite of Hikari, because he's also, like, a degenerate gambler, but instead of like he himself hitting jackpots and getting buffed, maybe it like forces you to gamble and like you have terrible luck. And like maybe each like gamble gives you some sort of new debuff that you have to deal with. So maybe something along those lines. Next, JoJo wanted to know what my thoughts were on JJK clickbait, and he actually sent me a bunch of examples, but I didn't want to show those here because I'm not trying to like, shade any other creators or anything. But yeah, I mean, I think it's part of the YouTube game. Like, people try to have ridiculous clickbait and crazy spoilers just in the titles or in the thumbnails. I do my best to tread that line as carefully as I can. I try to be very cognizant of spoilers, and sometimes I wish I could just say crazy stuff in the thumbnail or in the title to get clicks. So I don't blame people for it, but I wish in general people were a little more considerate. And then for your final question here, man, I don't know. It's so tough because it's hard to gauge exactly where Sukuna's at, right? He may have more tricks up his sleeve. He may be able to pull out some genius maneuvers that make it hard to say. So yeah, he's rough, down a couple arms, stab through the heart, curse technique presumably on cooldown. But Gojo for sure. And then there's probably an argument to be made for some of the other like top of the top heavy hitters in the verse, but I'm not comfortable saying anybody but Gojo just because Sukuna's proved he's him, man. Finally, we got this question from A on Kashimo versus Enel, the two lightning gods. And as you guys know, I'm making my way through One Piece, so I don't know if I have the best grasp of it, but I think Enel, just because I don't know what Kashimo's going to do to him. He's going to be immune to Kashimo's lightning, he's going to be immune to his physical attacks since he can just kind of phase through them. Plus, he has the mantra, which is like the foresight, and his attack power just seems way higher as well. This man was out here destroying islands. So I'm going to go Enel, but let me know y'all's thoughts on that. Anyways, y'all, that's going to do it for this one. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.